Hi, welcome back to Scars Left Behind, podcast episode 21. Also, something a little bit different, a little new. You will now be able to watch these on YouTube. So, I thought I would, try a new feature and see how it goes. So, before we get straight in, I just want to say that I hope everyone has had a great day, a great week so far, staying safe, social distancing and all of that. So let's get right into it. So the topics of discussion will be social movements, pandemics, damage, and Honeybee, health, and Dr Jessica Nouhavandi. So, in June 2015, a white supremacist opened fire inside the historic African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston. And if I'm looking down, it's not me being rude, it's me looking at the notes. South Carolina, killing 9 black congregants, including the minister. The massacre sparked a crescendo of anti-racist protests, including often successful demands for the removal of statues of Confederate generals from public spaces throughout the South. And I also want to point out that this is not my opinion. This is the opinion of the person who wrote this article, and it's also an analysis. 2 years later, a coalition of white nationalists arrived in Charlottesville, Virginia, for a Unite the Right, inverted commas, rally aimed at protesting and reversing the local city council's decision to remove from the city's centre of a 100-year-old statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, who, obviously, if you are a person of colour, you probably already know about Robert E. Lee. But he's a bit of a controversial guy. Also gathered in Charlottesville were civil rights activists who sought to support the city's resolve in removing the statue and to press for further reforms aimed at dismantling institutional white supremacy. The event turned violent after the white nationalists attacked the racial justice advocates with tiki torches, pepper spray and lighter fluid. Fights erupted, injuring at least 30 people. The weekend of protests ended when one of the white nationalists deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of anti-racist counter-protesters, injuring 19 and killing 1. Refusing to condemn either the goals or the actions of the white nationalists, President Trump commented that there were very bad people and very fine people on both sides. Now again, please take into account that this is an opinion and analysis. So, being someone who is clearly, white, I don't agree with the riots turning violent. And if there's one thing, according to this person, that Trump did get right, it's probably what he said. Very bad people and very fine people on both sides, which there are. Trump was correct about that in this encounter between white nationalists and civil rights activists. There were undoubtedly good individuals and bad individuals on both sides. How, then, can we judge which movement was the good one and which the bad? Again, it's just looking at both sides. The answer can be found in the sociological study of social movements. Over decades of focused research, the field has demonstrated that evaluating the moral compass of individual participants does little to advance our understanding of the morality or the actions of a large movement. Only by assessing the goals, tactics, and outcomes of movements as collective phenomena can we begin to discern the distinction between good and bad movements. So I will give you an example, and please do forgive me if I don't fully remember or recollect, but the only good social movement were the Rosa Parks movement. Again, where there was this divide between, blacks could only sit at the back or whatever. Or again, please forgive me if I get it mixed up. But in my opinion, that's probably the only time that a social movement went good. Another movement was the MLK. There were probably the only two off the top of my head that in a social movement worked. Modern social movement theory developed from foundational studies by several generations of scholars, notably W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, and C.L.R. James, E.P. Thompson, Eric Hobsbawm, Charles Tilly, and Howard Zinn. Their works analysing large historical processes provided later social scientists with three working propositions. First, the morality of a movement is measured by the type of change it seeks. Good movements are emancipatory. They seek to pressure institutional authorities into reducing systemic inequality. Rosa Parks, for instance. Extending democratic rights to previously excluded groups and alleviating material, social and political injustice. Bad movements tend to be reactionary. They arise in response to good movements and they seek to preserve or intensify the exclusionary structures, laws and policies that the emancipatory movements are challenging. So you have this backwards and forwards action going on. So you get your effect. Second, large-scale institutional changes that broaden freedom or advance the cause of social justice are rarely initiated by institutional authorities or political elites. Rather, most social progress is the result of pressure exerted from the bottom up, by ordinary people who press for reform by engaging in collective and creative disorders outside the bounds of mainstream institutions. And third, good intentions aspiring to achieve emancipatory goals by no means guarantee that a movement will succeed. So there are no guarantees that a movement will succeed, but that's freedom, right? We have a freedom of going on a protest. We want change, right? There are good ways of going about it, and there are bad ways which turn into violence, which defeats the purpose. The highly popular and emancipatory protests of the 1960s, as well as the influence of groundbreaking works in social history mentioned above, inspired a renaissance in the study of social movements in subsequent decades. Focusing primarily on inverted commas good movements, a new generation of social scientists sought to identify the environmental circumstances, organisational features and strategic choices that increased the likelihood that good intentions would translate into tangible change. This research has generated a rich trove of findings. Successful movements must define their goals clearly and target the institutions that have the power to make the changes they are demanding. And as we all know, regardless of your political standing, or regardless of where you stand politically, our political government isn't very good. The politicians aren't trustworthy, and so you have this divide. Who do you believe? Who do you trust? Successful movements cannot be greedy. They must recognise and respect members' private lives and personal obligations, prepare participants for the dangers and risks of each protest, and allow each individual to choose, without coercion, which actions they are willing to take. So basically, without outside influence, which actions are you willing to take? And which actions are you not willing to take? And I feel, in my opinion, that with politicians, especially in the UK, because I can only speak on politicians in the country I live in, but a lot of them, 9 times out of 10, they are coerced. And they don't actually fulfill your wishes. Successful movements generate the solidarity needed to undertake collective action by creating an active and supportive internal life and culture among their participants. The internal life of a movement should prefigure the emancipatory changes sought in the broader society. It should offer interactional and decision-making opportunities not available outside the movement, including social and cultural events that are enriching and fun, and which build the mutual trust necessary for sustaining collective action. Successful movements must anticipate repression, including standoffs with institutional authorities, forcible dispersal by police, confrontations with counter-protesters, long-term interference from intelligence agencies, and mass arrests. So, we need to respect each other's sides, each other's differing opinions, but we need to come to a consensus where it suits both parties. Sites of protests are thus both vibrant and vulnerable, but social movements that are attempting to ameliorate big social problems and gaping contradictions in the democratic order, economic inequalities, racism, patriarchy are long-term processes. As such, the clash between white supremacists and racial justice activists that took place in Charlottesville in 2017 should be viewed as a recent moment in the long civil rights movement that began at the end of the Civil War. Persistence, sustaining commitments, perhaps over the course of a lifetime, expanding networks while forming and reforming coalitions, assessing failures and devising new strategies, exploiting new political opportunities with fresh tactical repertoire, and integrating new generations into the life of the movement is key to assuring further moments of success. As the pioneers of social history have shown, this is how bad movements are defeated and good changes are won. And, again, regardless of where you stand politically, the changes you want made are valid, but it's how you go about changing those and making that change a reality in the steps will make it easier if both parties align and set out a detailed plan that is very clear in your goals, and then you can move on. I do believe that protests, albeit they are civil and they don't turn to violence, right? And protests and other forms of social movement processes are vital, but it's how you go about it. Because a lot of the times they go wrong because of an instance of where someone may have been a bit violent, or then the fight broke out, and then what was good from the protest is now being diminished. It's now diminished, and what went on negates the success, and now that process is known for the bad stuff that happened. So I think there's a fine balance. But switching topics, the next one is about pandemic's damage. So, and if you have your own thoughts, then do please write them down in the comments. Let's strike up a conversation. So, major changes are needed to reverse the profound social, educational and economic damage caused by the coronavirus pandemic, concludes a landmark review. The review by the British Academy, published on the anniversary of the UK's first lockdown, predicts that the pandemic will cause a decade-long shadow amidst declining public trust, worsening mental health, widening social inequalities, bringing together more than 500 pieces of evidence. The review identified 9 key areas of social impact that need investment to mitigate the damage caused by the virus. The impact of COVID-19 is not coming to an end. The social, economic and cultural impacts of the pandemic will cast a long shadow, said Molly Morgan-Jones of the British Academy at a press conference on Monday. The review found that the UK's successful COVID-19 vaccine rollout has failed to restore trust in the government, leaving high levels of distrust that experts warn will undermine efforts to change public behaviour. The review found that the UK's successful COVID-19 vaccine rollout, sorry, that was a typo, distrust in the UK government climbed last December and until early March has hovered at 61%, with trust at 21%. The review found the numbers mark a sharp reversal from the early stages of the pandemic in May 2020. Slightly more people trusted than distrusted the government. Distrust in national government remains relatively high. I don't think the rollout is being attributed to government competence. It's being attributed to the National Health Service and local delivery systems, said Dominic Abrahams at the University of Kent, UK. Distrust is a major challenge because it undermines the ability to mobilise public behaviour for wider social and health benefits. According to the review, which was commissioned by Patrick Vallance, the UK's chief scientific advisor. The wide-ranging review explores the social effects COVID-19 will have for many years to come after the epidemic is brought under control. Young people are expected to be disproportionately hard hit in coming years, with the review concluding it is unfeasible for the lost education from months of school closures to be wholly recovered. And my thing is, how we handled the pandemic was a total fuck up. Right? And having kids go back to school and then for a week and then after that then close down schools again, like what the hell? Right? Now I know that obviously, you know, unfortunately Germany was more prepared. New Zealand was more prepared, but we wasn't. And now we're having this flip-flop, going back and forth. It's like opening and closing, opening and closing. Now hopefully, with the, you know, proposed 5-week reopening, hopefully we won't have any more issues. But who's to say that something else won't pop up? Young people are expected to be disproportionately hard hit in coming years, which is true, with the review concluding it is unfeasible for the lost education from months of school closures to be wholly recovered. It will never be recovered. The education system is in a mess and needs to change. The NHS is in a mess, but it's been that way for years because they have never had the right financial support. So we've got all these issues now coming to the fore, or they've already been there, but we've never really paid much attention, and now something like a pandemic has brought it to light. So now we are having to wake up and realise that if we don't save the NHS, right, give the doctors, nurses, right, the equipment they deserve, right, then we're going to be in a deeper mess than we would ever think. Richard Blundell at University College London says extra tutoring and learning for young people will need to be long-term and permanently in place. That will require getting broadband and hardware to everyone who needs it, he has. But again, you need to make that feasible for everyone across the board, because families in lower income, right, they can't afford, right, internet. You know, the only thing they can afford or are struggling to afford is putting food on the table, clothing their kids, feeding themselves. Right. Meanwhile, they're working a minimum wage job that's not paying them the right amount. So it's all very well saying, oh, we need to give broadband and internet to everyone, but you need to make it feasible. Or you need to have a program in place where, you know, where you cut down the price per month for everyone, and what's left over you donate or so on, right? So you can't just say that. While young people have had a far fewer physical health impacts from the pandemic, the mental well-being of those aged between 16 and 24 deteriorated more than any other age group during the first lockdown, the review says. It also found that the pandemic exacerbated existing inequalities along gender, ethnic and income lines. COVID revealed shocking inequalities that had been there all along, said Morgan Jones. That's what I said. No, they've always been there, but unfortunately and sadly, it has taken a pandemic to bring it to the fore and bring it to everyone's attention. Investment to narrow the digital divide and reimagine urban spaces are among the solutions proposed by the British Academy in a second report, also published today. And I will include this link to the article in the description below, so you can go and have a look at it. Right, next segment. This is the Honeybee and Dr Jessica Nouhavandi. Long before the COVID-19 pandemic emerged, Dr Jessica Nouhavandi was acutely aware of the structural challenges and inequities plaguing the US healthcare system. As someone who spent a decade running a small family-owned pharmacy, she was particularly attuned to the lack of consistency, affordability and transparency in the pharmaceutical industry. The fact is, we have 200 million people in this country taking medications who are getting drastically different pricing. Depending on where they get their prescriptions filled and who their insurance provider is, Nouhavandi recently told Health, we have a long way to go to provide consistency and transparency in the healthcare system, and the pharmacy experience is a big part of that. Now, again, in the UK, we are lucky, or in some respects, that we have free healthcare. Which I think should be universal. I think the US should have that, right? But I don't know the US health system that well, obviously, So whatever I propose may not be feasible. But I think free healthcare should be universal. Because why pay the absorbent amount that you do a month when with the right program in place it could be free? But that's just my thought. In 2017, Nouhavandi co-founded Honeybee Health, a revolutionary online pharmacy concept designed specifically to address the inequalities of prescription drug pricing. Honeybee's mission is to level the playing field for consumers by cutting the middlemen, insurance companies and pharmacy benefit managers, out of the equation. Honeybee buys medication directly from FDA-approved US wholesalers and sells them to patients via its online platform. Patients do not need health insurance in order to make a purchase. It's a groundbreaking model that has brought consumer drug prices down by as much as 80% compared to traditional pharmacies, which is amazing. But you should not have to take someone who used to work in the field to co-found something in order to achieve this. This should be universal. You know, everybody's struggling financially, and you're now asking them to fork out more money just for the medication they need. This radical approach to making prescriptions more affordable has earned Honeybee plenty of accolades over the years, including most recently from Fast Company, which included the online pharmacy among its newly released list of the world's most innovative companies for 2021. But perhaps even more notably, the value of Honeybee's cost-cutting approach was made crystal clear amid the COVID-19 pandemic, when millions lost jobs and health insurance and struggled to buy prescription medication. Honeybee provided an affordable option for those who lacked insurance. And these are the following questions that she did in an interview. What specifically inspired you to launch Honeybee Health? Was there a particular incident or event that made you decide it was time to establish your own online pharmacy to challenge the big pharmacy system? She says, I'd been a pharmacist 10 years, running an independent pharmacy that accepted insurance and generally followed the traditional way of doing things. And unlike chain store pharmacists, we were able to see what the acquisition price was for medications and the big difference each customer was paying for the same exact medication. It was frustrating to realise how little we could do about that. Even if I knew I could give a patient a better price because I knew what that medication really cost, I couldn't do that because I had to run everything through insurance. And this is a completely different topic, right? But I'm just gonna throw it in there though. But I don't think doctors should be on the board. For insurance companies. I don't think that should be the case, because that's a conflict of interest. But no, that's just me. Let me know what you think about that. Some people were paying $10 for their prescription versus others who were paying $90. There was no single place for people to have truth and transparency and consistency of pricing. And so that's kind of how we came up with the idea. When we first thought of starting Honeybee Health, Many called us crazy for being willing to fight back against the layers of middlemen profiting off our patients. Have you found it challenging to make consumers aware of and comfortable with the online pharmacy concept? Yes, that's why we do even more on our website explaining to consumers who we are and how we got here. We are pharmacists and pharmacist technicians who have been doing this for years and years. When people are considering online pharmacies, I urge them to ask, who are the people running this pharmacy? Are you going to purchase medications from people who have never done this before? Or are you going to an online pharmacist? In addition, even though we're online, we make sure that people still get a personalised experience. For example, our pharmacists provide individualised supplement recommendations based on what prescription medications you're taking. And if customers ever have any questions about medications or their order, they can always quickly and easily reach one of us for help. Why is this a mission you're so passionate about? What I tell people is that you can't unsee the things I've seen. I've seen how so many people and families have simply walked away because they couldn't afford their medication. It's so sad and heartbreaking. There aren't many options in our current healthcare system, so I felt like someone had to step forward and say, we have to change things. There are very few direct pay options out there that are transparent, and we will continue on our mission to provide that for people, because we've seen how important it is in real life. This is really personal to us. Both my partner and I have very personal experiences with family members not being able to afford medication. Right now, we're letting people down as a system. People are not able to afford their medications. COVID exposed more of that. We need to figure out how we can get more people to be able to access safe and affordable medication. Can you explain in a little more detail and why operating outside the traditional healthcare system has allowed you to make prescription medication so affordable? All we do is cut out the middleman. We buy directly from distributors and sell to patients, and we cut out everybody else. The problem right now with the system is there are so many hands in the pot, and for every layer a medication goes through, there is a price markup. We are trying to get medications at the most bare bones cost that we can for patients. We have partnerships with FDA approved manufacturers that allow us to do that, and the more we grow, the more we buy from the distributors, the better prices people get, because we will have the leverage to negotiate better drug prices for patients. These big chain pharmacies have a lot of leverage too. That's the truth. If we all came together and said we're not going to do this anymore, we could negotiate and get the affordable prices people deserve. When we first came on the scene, there was one other company doing this, but more and more people are starting to catch on that we don't need to operate within the same confines. We've been operating within for hundreds of years. Can you talk about why the Honeybee health model of providing prescription was so important during COVID-19 outbreak? It's all about access. I think that COVID brought that out. Once people couldn't leave their homes, they started wondering, what do we do? Where do we go? And how do we get care? We are raising our hands saying here we are. And we did our best to show people that this is how it should be done. You should be able to get the same medication you have been getting, quality medication delivered to your door in a safe way, with the same personalised pharmacist experience, and it should cost way less. What is on the horizon for Honeybee Health? What would you like to tackle next and why? We're very excited to continue expanding on our multi-manufacturer options. We want every single drug we list to have several options. We also want to be able to offer more controlled substances by the end of the year. In addition, we are currently licensed in 44 states and we want to expand into 50 states. I think the most exciting thing is we are trying to partner with like-minded organisations so we can reach more people as a direct-to-consumer company. We'd love to partner with organisations that support veterans and AARP and organisations that support women's health, which is one area where we've done a lot of advocacy work for. Also, for us, it's all about doing the right thing and figuring out how to reach the people who need us. And that's what we need. We need more people. Whether you are still within your industry or you have left your industry, I think it's important that people like Dr Jessica Nouhavandi and other people in different industries, take note of what's happening. Look at taking note of prices, what the markups and all of that. And if you are lucky enough to work with an owner who is open and you can, you're open to new changes and open to changing the way he or she works or her company works, then great. But if not, there are other ways that you can make a difference. Now you don't necessarily have to go down the route of Dr Jessica Nouhavandi, but where she created and co-founded an app. But there are other ways you can go about making changes that benefit people. So it does not have to cost an absorbent amount of money each month, right? And it's about, and above all else, it's about giving people the service they need, regardless of the cost, right? You can have a massive cost disparity, right? A customer could be paying $500 and another customer could be spending $90, right? Why should a customer who pays $500, right, get, in inverted commas, preferential treatment, whereas the customer who has paid $90 gets mediocre treatment? Can you see the disparity? It's regardless of the amount of the cost, the pricing, whatever, you should get the same treatment across the board. And it's the same with medication, right? You should get the same price regardless. But that will be it for today's episode, and again, this will be going up on our YouTube. So this is the first video podcast I've done for our YouTube. So yeah, thank you for joining, listening. Do please give us a like, comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find our podcast on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Acast, Breaker, Anchor, Spotify, and so on. Which those will all be linked in the description. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great day wherever you are. See you later.